as a righteous Gentile, as a goy, I'm going to ask you why or if I should believe in God. I mean, you did these barnstorming debates with our mutual friend Christopher Hitchens, where you debated this issue. As you pointed out, you were close with Christopher. We all have great Christopher stories. I was never, one of his atheist hangers on. I just didn't really think about it very much. But I suspect at that point I was probably more in his camp than I was on whoever he was debating. But, I imagine part of your job is dealing with people who are struggling with the idea of, as Christopher called it, the celestial North Korea.
Right. I know.
The dictatorship in the sky clever line, by the way.
Which I always thought was interesting, because it suggested that his capacity for envisioning who God was not benevolent. Mm-hmm. And I always think that, like, your conception of God has something to do with how you grew up and your first images of God.
And we are, by the way, moving away from that atheist moment where, Dawkins and Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris and Christopher, there's a lot of people finding or trying to find something. I mean, does that surprise you in any way?
So here's what I actually think.
You did write an essay in the Atlantic that touched on this.
Exactly. Yeah. Here's what I actually think in retrospect. Well, I wrote an essay in the Atlantic, actually, about paganism that got me in trouble with the pagans, but that's a separate question. I think that the real push for that atheistic moment was actually not about God; it was about religion. Mm-hmm. It was about, honestly, it was driven by 9/11 and Islamic terrorism. And if you read Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens, that's who they were really upset. In fact, like more than once, one or more of them said to me, like, basically, I'm happy to debate with you, but you're not the issue. Your kind of religion is not really the religion that I'm. It is the ones who believe we have to fight. And if you deny our God, then you are terrible and evil and so on. So I think what is happening now is that there is a sense in which people are willing to, I always say, like, the great division is not between people who believe and don't believe, it's between materialists and anti-materialists. If you believe the world is more than stuff, if you think there is a mystery at the heart of the universe and not a puzzle, then you're on the religious side of the ledger. What that means, religions are attempts to relate to and to understand that ultimate mystery.
Did you ever have any shakiness in your belief as an adult, as a rabbi?
Oh, yeah.
You did?
Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav said he was a moon man. His faith waxed and waned.
Yeah.
So I felt the same
What
way.
precipitates some of those doubts?
Not the usual things. Like, I had a brain tumor. I had cancer.
Yeah.
I never thought, why me? It was just, I think, the overpoweringness of the material world that sometimes, like, as in the words of one Hasidic rabbi, it's like holding a penny up to your eye, that it blocks out everything else. Sometimes it's hard for me to make the connection that I really do believe is beyond us, and it takes sometimes where you are or the disposition you're in. And there is the emotional force of suffering, not one's own, but the world's suffering, that makes it hard.
Yeah. For me, it's always a bit of Pascal's wager about all of it,
Although,
but I'm going to buy some insurance.
But William Kaufman, who wrote these wonderful books, he has a section in Faith of a Heretic about Pascal's wager, and he says, what happens if you get up to heaven and God says, actually, I value honesty.
Yeah.
And you were prudential, but you were not honest, So that may be too. It's very, I think that doubt is actually, I wrote an article for Sapir, which is the journal of the Maimonides Fund, where I'm a scholar in residence, about how doubt is part of faith. And I think that that's actually true. I think that there is a sort of shadow side to faith that most
Does it
people
go
feel.
away, the doubt, as you accrue more knowledge, experience?
Not in a linear fashion.
Yeah.
I think it waxes, and there are times of more and times of less. And at least for me, I can't.
But you ever go into the synagogue and you say, I don't know if I can do this today. I'm just not. I'm in one of those periods where I don't know what is true and what isn't.
I can, if I went to the synagogue solely for a connection to God, yes.
Yeah.
But
You would have those days.
I also go for a connection to the Jewish people and to history and to lots of other. There's a famous joke about Goldberg and Schwartz that are walking to the synagogue, and somebody says, "Hey, I know why Goldberg's going to the synagogue, but Schwartz, you don't believe in God. Why are you going?" And Schwartz says, "Well, Goldberg goes to talk to God, and I go to talk to Goldberg." And there's a lot of that in the synagogue. It's like there's a communal space where, and so I still feel like both comforted and uplifted, even if at the moment I'm having doubts.
What is it about society right now? I mean, I look at this all the time, not from the perspective of somebody who is communing with God, but somebody who is looking at my 14-year-old child and seeing the world that she's growing up in. And everybody has those moments, right? That this is so different. But it wasn't that different between, how I grew up and how somebody in the 70s or, early 80s, late 70s grew up. It was pretty similar in some ways. It was only towards the end that it's starting to change. But the changes have been so radical recently.
Yes.
And, the phone, I'm going to sound like Jonathan Haidt here, but like girls in particular are glued to the phones. Like from the perspective, I mean, people come to you, I presume, with kind of questions about this stuff. Where are we as a culture? I mean, you did write that piece, and I recommend people read this, about a pagan culture in America now. I mean, what is, when you look out at this landscape, are you one of those people who sees just an endless sea of pornography and, phones and fentanyl? I mean,
no.
You have a more positive
No, I have a more positive view.
Yeah.
I was actually, I'm hopeful by nature.
Yeah.
I can't help it. Like I once described my emotional disposition as like taking a dive into the Dead Sea. I keep coming to the surface. I can't stay depressed.
Yeah.
But I think that the one sentence diagnosis, and actually I was just reading this book, which I don't know if you've read, you may well have, by Matthew Rose, called After Liberalism. It's about 5 thinkers on the radical right. Yeah. And almost every one of them who are on the radical right. So we're not talking about, it's everybody from Spengler on. They're all lamenting the loss of tribalism and rootedness. And you see that now in the reaction on the right. And what I would say is that almost everything you mentioned, the phone, the screens, the mobility, all of this takes us away from the sense that we are not purely individuals, but connected in an organic community. One of the reasons why people go to churches or to synagogues or to mosques is because they want to feel connected to other people and communities. And I do fear that we're raising our kids with, you're connected to your Instagram community, but give a year, 5 years, 10 years, that's not going to be your community anymore. And so without interpersonal connections, I think the soul withers, and we really need to rediscover how to connect to one another, because without that, I don't see how a society can stay sound.
Yeah, I mean, I always point this out, that when I would go to Trump rallies covering them as a journalist, I saw the same thing every time, of people like they were meeting a mail-order bride. Yeah. They said, my friend, we're meeting here, and she's this person. They're usually in their late 60s, sometimes 70s. And you realize that they never met each other. They were on a Facebook group about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump was giving them a sense of meaning that was way beyond the idea of politics. But you're talking about identity here. I mean, I saw something. I can't say that I watched this clip, so I apologize if I'm buggering this thing up. But it was a Tucker Carlson thing from yesterday. And, the headline gives you the sense of it. Ben Shapiro says he's the great enemy of identity politics, but all he cares about is Israel and Judaism and his community, as you're saying. And that's just a form of identity politics.
I think if identity politics is you must treat me a certain way because I am this person.
Yeah.
That, I think, is a problem, as opposed to treating me the same way you would treat anyone else. If it is, this is who I am and that's what I care about, that seems to me perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
So it depends how you deploy it. If I say to you, Michael, you have to treat me differently because I'm a Jew, that's
Oh, but I do that
identity
already.
politics.
It's fine. Yeah, like, you don't have to tell
That's
me.
identity
It's fine.
politics.
I've been.
But if I say the reason I care about this because I'm Jewish, if somebody says the reason I care about trans issues is because I'm trans, I said that makes perfect sense. Like I would expect that if you cared about like issues about the Irish or bar hopping issues.
What are the issues with the Irish? God.
Right, exactly.
But our universal failure over the years? Amazing.
Who was it? It was some Irish politician said, "Yeah, I'm an Irish politician. I have a chip on both shoulders."
Yeah, that's essentially right. Yeah.
So, but I think to have an identity and to promote an identity is not the same as identity politics, which is claiming special rights or privileges because of the identity you have.